In this video, I'm going to introduce how to work with the Eclipse integrated development environment to compile and run existing programs, for example, the ones that come with our books like Java How to Program and Java for Programmers, and also how to create new programs from scratch. Now, before you install Eclipse, you're going to want to install Java on your systems. Now, if you're working with Mac OS X, you should go to developer.apple.com/Java and take a look at how to work with Java on the Mac platform. Now, on that platform, you may already be familiar with the Xcode development tools, in which case you could use those, but Eclipse will also work on the Mac OS X platform as well, and if you do want to use Eclipse, you should take a look at the rest of this video. Now, first thing you're going to want to do is go to the Oracle website that you see up here on the screen and make sure that you download and install the Java Development Kit, or JDK as it's called. And in particular, you're going to want to take a look at this first table, Java Platform Standard Edition, and the current version is update 24 as of the time of this recording. Now, you're going to want to install specifically the JDK, not the JRE. The JDK contains the so-called JRE, or Java Runtime Environment, as well, so you don't need to download the JRE separately. Just download the JDK, and from this website you can download the JDK for the Windows operating system, the Linux operating system, and also for the Solaris operating system. Again, if you're working on Mac OS X, then they have their own separate implementation of Java SE6 that you can use and run Eclipse using that on the Mac platform. Now, after you've downloaded and run the installer from this website, you'll also want to make sure that you carefully follow the installation instructions in the link right below here underneath JDK 6 docs. Please make sure you carefully follow the instructions, in particular for setting your path, P-A-T-H, path environment variable, because if in the future you decide that you do want to work with some of the command line tools that are part of the JDK, the path has to be set up correctly in advance for you to be able to use those tools. Now, once you've gone ahead and installed the JDK, the next step is to go to the Eclipse website, eclipse.org, as you see up here, and you'll want to download and install one of the many different versions of the IDE. In particular, we're going to go to the Download Eclipse button here and click it, and the very first item is the one that we need for most people who are doing basic Java development, the Eclipse IDE for Java developers. And you'll see over here on the right side that you can click this little combo box and select the Windows, Linux, or Mac OS X platforms. Now, in each case, regardless of which one you select, all you're getting is an archive file, like a zip file or a tar file, that contains the compressed set of files that make up the integrated development environment. So once you've downloaded that compressed archive, you'll want to extract that to your system. In my case, on Windows, I placed it in my C drive's root folder in a subfolder called Eclipse, and you see all the files of the IDE here. And for the Windows operating system, you can see the Eclipse executable. For other operating systems, it won't be an exe file, but you'll see this same icon, which represents the executable, and you'll simply double-click that icon to launch the IDE. Now, once you double-click the icon to launch the IDE, eventually you'll get to this dialog called the Workspace Launcher. And basically, Eclipse allows you to create as many different workspaces as you want, and each workspace can have as many different projects within it as you want. So if you're working on large applications that have many projects associated with them, you might have a separate workspace for each of those applications and then have all the related projects as parts of that workspace. The default workspace's name is Workspace, and by default it's placed into your user directory. I'm on the Windows operating system here, so it's being placed into my users /Paul folder. If you're on some other operating system, first of all, the other operating systems all use /s to separate folders and directories, so you'll see /s instead of backslashes, and you won't see a root folder like you do here on Windows, but you'll still see the name Workspace at the end of the path, and that's going to be the default location where your projects get placed. Once you click OK, it will finish loading up the integrated development environment, So basically it's walking through the process of loading up all the different pieces of the IDE and the plugins for different types of developments. We specifically downloaded the Eclipse IDE for Java developers, which is what you see here. But once you have Eclipse installed, you can actually keep installing additional pieces so that you can do different types of development. So for example, you could download the tools that let you do C and C++ development in this same IDE if you'd like. Now, this is the welcome screen of the IDE, and on this welcome screen there are a number of icons. So for example, here's an overview of the IDE. Here we have a list of what's new in this version of the IDE, some samples that you can try out, tutorials to help you use the IDE, and then finally the so-called workbench, which is actually where you'll do your development. So I'm going to click this icon, and here is the basic layout for Java development. Your projects will be over here in the left side of the screen in the so-called Package Explorer window. And in the center of the screen here is where you'll do your actual code development, looking at code, modifying code. It's also where you'll see the source code when you're in debug mode as well. If there's compilation errors in your code, you'll see them showing up down here at the bottom of the screen. Now what we want to do first is show you how to bring in source code for an existing program and then be able to run that code. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the File menu and select New Java Project. And the first project that I'm going to be working with is called Welcome 1. So I'm going to go ahead and name it that, Welcome 1. And within this you can see that you can choose the default location to store that project in the workspace in the Welcome 1 folder that it will create. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Next here. Here's where you can actually configure lots of additional settings for your application. For example, you see this link here, add project welcome 1 to the build path, adding additional source code, creating new folders. So in larger applications you can actually manage a lot of that right here in the new Java project dialog. For those of you who are just getting started with Java development, you can leave all of these options alone and simply click the Finish button. So let me go ahead and do that. And now it's going to create the project here. If I expand the project by clicking the arrow, you can see there's a source folder, and there's also the runtime library as part of the project. These are the pieces that you need to be able to run your program. And next what we want to do is import into the project the existing source code for our program. So for example, if I right click here, I can select Import, and you can see that there's a general category and lots of other options as well. In my case, I want to import from the general category some files in the file system. So I select File System and I click Next. And now I need to be able to go find the actual source code that we're going to be working with. So I'm going to click Browse, and on my system I have on my Windows computer's C drive a folder called Examples with the examples from Java How to Program 9th edition in it. And I'm going to go to Chapter 2, which is where our first source code example is in the book, and specifically Figure 2.1 is where the first example is in the book. So I'll go ahead and click OK on that, and you can see in the left column is the folder, in the right column is the one source code file within that folder, and I'm going to go ahead and check that off and click Finish. And now, when I go back to the source node here, you can see that there's something called the default package, which is the set of files in my program. I'll talk more in the book about what packages are once we get into the actual development of programs. And then separately here we have the welcome1.java source code file. And in fact, I can expand that out and it's going to show me information about what's in that file. We have the class called welcome1, and we have a method called main, which is the starting point of a Java application, and the S means it's a special type of method called a static method. As you work with the IDE more and more, you'll get familiar with the different icons that it's displaying. So for example, this icon here indicates a Java source code file, this icon indicates a package, this icon indicates a folder of files within the project. So let's go ahead and double click the welcome1.java source code file. And now you can see the actual source code here in the source code editing window. I'm going to narrow down my left column here a little bit so we can see the source code better. So you can actually reorganize the different windows in the IDE if you would like. For example, the task list here, if you don't want to see this on the screen at a given time, you can hit the minimize button, which will move it over to the right side here. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. So this is the minimized task list. I can do the same thing for the outline window, and now they just show up as icons, so I have more space to work with. If I want the code editor to take up the whole window, I can double click its tab, and now it expands out to fill all of the space that it can. And if I want to go back to the regular view, I can double click the tab again to go back to that regular view. So here we see the source code for the Welcome 1 program. Now in Eclipse, it's actually constantly compiling your program for you in the background. So if there's any problems in the code, you'll see them down here. So for example, if I remove this semicolon, eventually I should see an error message show up, and in fact I did see the error message show up here instead of down in the problems window. Here's a little X indicating that there's a syntax error, and it's even telling me what I need to do. I need to insert the semicolon. So let's go ahead and put that back in, and you see that the red squiggly that was there a moment ago, let's put it back, so there's this little red squiggly indicating an error message right there. If I put the semicolon back in, the red squiggly goes away, and now my program is compiling successfully. Now, when I have only one project open in the IDE, I can go over here and I can say to run the project. When I have multiple projects open in the IDE, I'll see separate folders here in the Package Explorer, and I can actually at any time right-click any one of those and say to run that. And when I do, you see I have two options here. I can run it as a Java applet or as a Java application. Java applications contain main methods, so when we have a program with a main method, we're going to use Java application. Late in our books, we have chapters that discuss Java applets as well, and at that point, you may want to choose the Java applet option instead. But for the most part, you're going to be working with Java applications. So I'm going to go ahead and click Java application. It's going to ask me if I want to save the source code that I had just modified. You see this asterisk here indicating that it's been modified. Right now there's only one file, but I can select all or select individual files. I can also say to always save things before I run a program, which you probably want to do because if you don't save your changes before you run, you may not actually see the proper results on the screen. So I'll go ahead and run it, and right here you can see that it says welcome to Java programming and welcome to Java programming again. And those of you who are looking at the first program in our book right now may be wondering where this additional statement came from, because that's not actually part of the original program. Honestly, I was recording a video for another IDE and I forgot to remove that statement, so I'm going to remove it now, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this as a Java application once again, and that's the actual proper output for the first program in our book. Now, the reason I had that second statement in there is I wanted to show you a feature of the IDE. So watch what happens as I type system and then follow that with a dot. I get this window in which it's showing me all of the different pieces that are allowed to go on the right side of that dot. So for example, if I start typing O for out, you see that now the only thing that can appear on the right side of that dot that starts with O is the item named out, which is the standard output object for doing console text-based output, which shows up down here in the IDE. So I can double click this to insert it. I can hit the enter key to insert it as well. Then when I type the next dot, I see everything that can go on the right side of that dot. So if I want to print stuff out, you can see I start typing PR and I get narrowed down in the list everything that starts with PR. Up here I had used println, so let's go ahead, let me go back and do that again. So print ln, so now it narrows it down to just the println methods as they're called, and you can see that there's various versions of println. This first one takes no arguments and simply outputs a new line character, and then there's versions for the different primitive types that are part of Java, as well as for the concept of an object and the concept of a string. Now in my case I'd like to output a string, so I'm just going to go ahead and type that string. Excuse me. Welcome to Java programming again. And you'll notice that there's a squiggly here at the end because this is not a complete statement yet. I don't have a semicolon. Once I put the semicolon, whoops, and then you see the squiggly goes away, indicating that the statement is compiling correctly. Down here, this kind of orange squiggly is indicating what it thinks is a spelling error to our name, Ditel, and in fact, as you hover over it, you see it even gives you some possibilities for quick fixes or doing things like adding Ditel to the dictionary so that you don't see these squigglies in the future. So now I have my updated program, and once again, I'll go up here. If I just click the play button, run welcome 1, I can see the new output of this program. And in this console window, by the way, is also where you'll do your input if you have an application that does input. So for example, let's go ahead and create a new project here, and in this case we'll call it the addition project, which is another example in chapter 2 of our Java books. And I'll go ahead and click finish. I'm going to expand my addition folder, right click on source and say import. I'm going to import from the existing file system. And again, this is on my computer's C drive in the examples folder. And let's go to chapter 2 once again. And within chapter 2, this should be figure 2.7. So there's my addition.java file. And I'm going to import that into the project. And now, if I come over here, you can see the addition.java file. I'll just open that up, and you can see here that we prompt the user to enter an integer, and then we read that integer in. We prompt the user to enter a second integer. We read that integer in. We add up the two numbers that the user typed, and then we display the results. Now, I will talk about this program in much more detail in the videos that are associated with our different books, but the idea is simply have the user enter two numbers, add them up, and display the results. So let me go ahead over here to the addition project and select Run As Java Application. And you see it prompts me to enter the first integer. I'll click here in the console window so I can do that. So let's type 100. And for the second integer, I'm going to type 23. Notice this strangeism here. The cursor seems to be at the beginning of the line instead of at the end of the line. And if I type 23, you see immediately it put the number that I'm typing at the end. It also puts what I typed in green so that I can tell what was the user input versus the program displaying text. And when I press enter again here, you can see it displays the sum is 123. Now, one warning I just want to give you is that sometimes when you're running console applications inside the IDE, things that you display using system.out or another object called system.error, ERR, the error stream, sometimes the text that you output is not going to be displayed correctly in this console window. If you ever come across that problem, that's a case where you may want to go out to the command line, a command prompt window in Microsoft Windows, or a shell in Linux and Mac, or a terminal in Mac OS, and you may want to switch to the actual program's folders on disk, compile and run the program with the Java Development Kit's command line tools, which we discuss in the books, and in that case you should see the output getting displayed correctly. Alright, so now what we've done is we've shown you how to create a project using existing source code. If it happens to be a program that has multiple source code files associated with it, which we start doing in chapter 3 of our Java books, you use the exact same technique that I just showed you. The only difference is that you want to make sure that all the different source code files of the program are selected. And the way we organize our files in the books is on a folder, a program by program basis, we have a folder that contains all of the appropriate source code file for that program. The only exception to that is when we start getting into creating our own packages of reusable classes, in which case we may have separate folders with different pieces of the same program. Now, the last thing I want to do is show you how to create a project from scratch. So let's just go ahead now and go ahead to the File menu. We'll say New Java Project, and let's call this one Welcome To, and I'll click Finish. Now, just like before, if I expand the Welcome To node, I see the source node. And if I right-click that, I can select New, and then I get all sorts of things that I can actually create in that folder, one of which is to create a new class. So let's go ahead and select Class, and in the vast majority of cases you'll be creating in Java either a class or an interface. And here you can see that it's telling me which folder it's going to place that in. I can specify my own package names, which again we'll learn more about later, not in this video but later in the books. And for now I'm just going to use the so-called default package. And let's call this class Welcome To. You can name it whatever you want. Most of the classes you create will be public, so I'll leave that. And the superclass line, Java Lang object, I'm going to leave alone. This is part of how Java works. Every class you create is actually based on an existing class, and if you don't specify that on your own, it can specify java.lang.object for you. So that's part of discussing a concept called inheritance, which we're not going to get into in this video here. The next thing is, because this is an application I'm creating, I would like it to create my main method. So by checking this, it will put the shell of the main method in there, and I can go ahead and click Finish. And now I see a basic class definition that has the class called Welcome To, and it's got a main method, which is where I put the statements that should be executed when this program is launched or executed from the IDE in this case. Now, by convention, Eclipse uses the curly braces, the starting opening curly brace at the end of the first line of the class definition. I personally prefer that to be on the beginning of the next line. Same thing with my methods, so I'm just going to go ahead and move those. Eclipse actually has code templates that you can edit so that you can have it place curly braces and parentheses and spacing the way you want. So if your company or institution has coding conventions that you want to adhere to, or you want all your programmers to adhere to, you can actually set up those code templates and then bring them into all the different programmers' IDEs. Now, in this case, I would like to just display a line of text to show you that in fact we can create a program from scratch. So let me start typing system dot, and again you see the help showing up that allows me to determine what can go after each dot. I'll type println, and let's just type hi there, and of course we need a semicolon. Whoops. Let's try that one more time. We need a semicolon at the end to complete our statement. And now we have this completed program. I can save the program right from the toolbar here, or as you saw previously, it will be happy to save it as you run the program. And again, if I right-click now, Welcome To, excuse me, and I say run this as a Java application, you can see hi there showing up in the console application window.